record on this computer. There we go. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so yes, that was the answer to that. We are recording.
Right.
And I will share, and I'll also share this when we get started. Let me find my papers here. We did receive some responses. We put out a member survey just asking basic questions of who you are, what are your top concerns, what are some ideas you have right now, and some needs. So I'll sort of speak broadly to them. Our hope is to kind of get this information throughout this call as well, and then have a high-level summary and do that kind of matchmaking and answering questions and connecting people, and taking the guidance from this survey and this call to figure out our next steps as a council.
Hey, Dawn,
Yes.
when we officially start, make sure to tell people you're recording.
Oh, good point. Good point. Can you all see that we're recording? Sometimes there's like some indication.
I see it, but not everybody knows.
Yeah, no, I just was curious if that comes through.
Yeah, I can see it.
Cool. I will remind people.
It's really cool to see all these names popping up.
I know, it's a little reunion of sorts. I was lamenting that we can't have yummy snacks and food that we usually have at our meetings.
Oh, I'd kill for pizza right now.
Yeah, some Spack Brothers would be really fantastic.
Yep.
We did get about 98 RSVPs. There were a bunch of duplicates, not a bunch, but there were some duplicates. So I anticipate that a good number of folks will join us as we get going. But I do think that we should, pretty much give it another minute here and then go ahead and get started.
How many of these little boxes will we be able to see? I mean, can we see 90?
I've been on calls where there are pages and pages of people. Generally, people on video float to the top of your list. And then if you hit that blue arrow, that we now have 2 pages of people. And then as people join, they'll just be either bumped to the top if they're video or added. I don't know if they're put in alphabetical order.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been on one I've been on a lot of Zoom meetings in the past 3 weeks, but not with so many people.
Yeah.
Hi, Karen.
It's pretty great.
Hi, Mim. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. All right, so I think we should go ahead and get started. And if those of you who actually, no, we're good. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us. I have this weird thing where my laptop is my camera and my desktop is where I'm looking at you. So I am looking at you, even though it looks like I'm not. Eye contact is important, and so this is even more strange, in this way. But thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dawn Plummer, and I am the Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. We have a lot of new names on our registration list, so I'm really excited to see people reaching out. I know this is a very intense time, and people are looking to connect and find resources and share and be helpful. And so we very much appreciate your taking the time. I also just wanted to quickly thank all of you. Many of you are very actively working, whether it's on the front lines, serving food, or managing, coordinating things from your home office or your laptop at your kitchen table. So I just want to commend you for the amazing work that our broad network of wonderful people and institutions are doing across this region in the face of unprecedented public health crisis. I also wanted to just take a moment to introduce the co-chairs of our steering committee of our Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. We have a recently seated steering committee after an election process, and we have now developed two co-chair roles. And so we have Dennis McManus from the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank and Mim Seidel from Chatham University, who is continuing on as our co-chair team. I don't know if either of you want to just share a brief welcome.
I just want to say welcome. Thank you, Dawn. And thank you, everybody, for taking this time to come together on this meeting. And thanks to the speakers, too, for what I'm sure will be very valuable information.
And this is my first full council meeting as one of the co-chairs. And I want to thank Don and Mim in particular, and Carlin and the rest of the staff for bringing me up to speed on some things, but as you're going to find out this evening, not enough. I'm happy to see some familiar faces and some familiar names up there, and I'd also like to thank everyone that made it possible for me to assume this role at a time of international crisis. It's made it a lot more interesting.
Thank you, Denny. And I will just make everyone aware, if you're joining us or if you're here, we are recording this call. We hope to capture a lot of information and share that out, including a recording of this conversation. So just wanted to make you aware. Very briefly, I wanted to also introduce our staff. We have a really wonderful team that has taken our existing workload and managed to kind of shuffle things around and do what we need to continue doing, and then also obviously be flexible to this moment. We have Carlin and Kiam and Sarah and Sam, and I believe Laura's also on the line. We have a great team. For those of you who aren't familiar, I think most of you might be familiar with the Food Policy Council. We've been convening food system stakeholders for the last 10 years. We work across the food system, so we convene, even included in this call, growers and farmers, people who are working in the emergency food system, policy advocates, elected officials, government agencies, distributors, grocery store owners, corner store owners, that kind of thing. Anything to do with food. We're really trying to look at what does our system look like and what does it need? And I think just very briefly wanted to say we're wrapping up over a 2-year project of writing a countywide Greater Pittsburgh Food Action Plan that lays out a bunch of beautiful strategies of how to build a more just, equitable, and sustainable food system, which in this time of crisis, we're seeing some of those strategies are actually being put into action on the fly right now. Some have already been moving. So just to say that as we've been looking at our food system, we knew we had vulnerabilities and fissures and inequities. And unfortunately right now, this situation is really laying them all bare and really, drawing out all of the difficulties of connection from local farms to consumers. How do we grow more food in our own spaces? How do we get healthy food to kids through school districts? How do we increase delivery options in the face of transportation challenges? How do we, all of the questions that we've asked ourselves are now sort of compounded. How do we, support small businesses that provide food in our community? So, this is just a really important time that we really redouble our efforts and see not only are we responding to a crisis, but how can we be building a food system that can be stronger going forward and more resilient, and sort of unpacking some of those structural inequities that we knew were already there, and create the kind of food system that we truly need. So I wanted to just share that little bit of background. And also just in terms of, this is our first, usually we meet once every other month for our full council meetings in person. So this is our first, what's that word, foray, whatever, first shot at a Zoom. So I'm hoping that this works well, but please, we appreciate your patience with, as we sort of make our way through this Zoom process. The way we have it set up is we hope that folks who are on the line who are not speakers today can interact and are invited to interact through the chat box. If you go to the bottom of your Zoom window, there's a chat with the 3 little dots, and if you click onto that, it'll open up your Zoom chat, group chat, and you can direct messages directly to an individual if you want to have a private outreach to someone, or if you want to write a question for everyone. That's the place to do that. We can also share a file of this conversation after the meeting. We encourage folks to drop in resources there. If you're referring in your comments to a resource or a document or a survey or anything, a volunteer opportunity, please drop in those those links there on the side. And I'm also going to try my hardest to like triple task here and read the things as they come in, because I'm hoping that as people are, we have a robust list of speakers. We really want to get a sense of the urgent needs across our system. So we have a number of speakers, and we'll have a pretty quick process. So we'll hear a couple of minutes of updates from speakers, how their organizations or entities are pivoting in this moment, what role they're playing, what challenges they're facing. If you could highlight policy changes that are relevant. This is the time to also call out for volunteers, move people to action. This is an opportunity to do that, and we'll obviously share those opportunities beyond just who's on the call here today, but in the ways that we follow up. And the final piece that we really want each speaker to underscore, and also we really invite you all to also share your reflections on what you think a Food Policy Council can do in this moment. What do you think a network like this could really help with? We, as a convener, we do a lot of communicating and connecting up of networks. And communication and coordination is really key right now. As all of you know, the partners you're in touch with, whether they're partners you've worked with for a long time or they're new, we as a council are trying to track where some of those critical conversations are happening. We want to identify those leaders in different conversations to direct people. So if you're a restaurant owner who's talking about how to support our restaurant communities, if you are providing emergency food, what are the key resources and who is leading those conversations? So that's some of what we're both tracking and want to be communicating with our broad membership. And some of you on the call represent some of those hubs of information. I did also want to encourage folks, if you're not connected to the Food Policy Council itself, we can follow up on the sidebar with how to join us on Facebook, on all of the ways that you can join us. Choose your fancy. We also have several listservs that are of interest and a newsletter. I did want to kind of lift out some of the communications hubs that have emerged thus far in terms of, and I will say we've been capturing this also in a resource page of our website, as many have resource pages. Ours are relevant to food system stakeholders. So we've been sharing guidance from the Department of Ag, the Department of Health, and things like that, depending on what you're looking for. But we're also sharing this where you can access information. Two of those important places on the issue of hunger and feeding and food security is the Food Feeding Task Force that is the county Department of Human Services is coordinating, and we'll hear from you in a bit here, but coordinating emergency food with emergency food providers, and there are conversations that are happening locally, and I'll leave that up to our speakers to share if those are open to the public or service providers, or the best way to connect. We also know there's a feeding task force at the state level where we're talking to state agencies and hearing those higher level policy updates and changes and how it impacts nonprofits. We also have this space, which are our member meetings, where we anticipate having, we usually have, like I mentioned, every other month these meetings, but we're trying to figure out if there are other gaps in communication and conversation that we might be able to fill right now. And so if there are conversations that you really just wish you could speak to, any group of folks, we likely know a lot of those folks if it's in the food system, and we're happy to fill that gap if needed. We do have two working groups that come together. One is on urban agriculture, so that's generally community gardeners and farmers and organizations that support urban agriculture and agriculture in general. With a meeting coming up, that would maybe be a place to connect if that's your interest, on April 7th. And we also have a food and health equity working group that'll meet on the 1st of April, and we can follow up with that information in the chat. We also know that PA Farm Market is a statewide organization that's led by the Penn State Extension, and we know that they've been holding regular webinars for farmers market managers, that they're answering a lot of very specific questions around farmers markets statewide. And then we're also looking to convene an emergency task force of those connected to farmers markets here in our region to make sure that we're meeting the needs of both market managers, communities, and farmers, and kind of helping facilitate connection and you know, emergency work we need to be doing to make sure that those spaces continue and you know, help provide access to fresh, locally grown food. And finally, I'll say, connected to the resource page that I mentioned before, we have the what did we call it? The Greater Pittsburgh Food Systems Resource page. And if anyone has any aspect of resources you want to put into the mix there, we welcome that. We can very much add to that. But we did also include a section for philanthropy. We know that the Pittsburgh Foundation has launched their emergency fund, and there may be other foundation grant opportunities coming up that are of interest to many of you. So we'll paste information there. So I'm going to stop there, and I bet I went over my time. I did. Okay, so we do have a series of speakers, and I will invite you to kick us off. Carolyn, if you could, with our first presentation.
Okay, hello, and thank you very much for the opportunity to just give you a little bit of update from the Department of Aging. I'm Carolyn Galvin, and I oversee the nutrition, home delivered meal, and congregate meals for the Area Agency on Aging. So first, you know, I really think I have to mention about how resilient our home delivered meal and senior center staff are with the congregate meal, and how they really have stepped up above and beyond to serve our seniors. They're an exceptional system, and so far we are holding on and we're stable. So for the most part, our home delivered meals continue without interruption, which is a good sign. We have to constantly monitor it. We're monitoring the delivery and the driver system because, as you know, we use older adults and volunteers to deliver these meals. So that's a little, you know, that's what's been the tricky part, is to monitor the capacity of these folks. The AAA has worked with the Home Delivered Meal Network over the last 2 weeks, moving from a routine 3-time-a-week delivery to a 1 to 2 week delivery. And we have gone to all frozen meals. So we're still looking at multiple options, but by going to the frozen meals, that gives us the ability to be flexible and deliver more, same amount of meals, but on less days, so we're not exposing our drivers, you know, to our older adults. It's extremely important and a challenge during this time also to do the visual check, but we continue to do that as we drop the meals, hang them on the doorknobs, call the people, step back, and still continue that check just to make sure that our, especially our vulnerable older adults, are doing okay during this situation. The network also continues to examine ways to deliver the same amount of food, again, with less deliveries, and to preserve and maximize our delivery resources. Drivers are trained on the CDC and Health Department guidelines, and so far it's been working very well. We've increased our calls and checkups to the consumers, and obviously where we identify the most vulnerable, we're calling them more frequently. For the congregate meal program, the state did relax the definition of congregate meal, and they've given us permission to do what they call a grab and go. So it's exactly that, as consumers that can get out. These are for individuals that would go to the senior centers and are signed up with the senior centers, that they can go and grab their meal and then go home and eat it. As we see, it was not taken advantage of at first, but now that we're seeing that more people are having more difficulty getting groceries, this number is rising, and our numbers for home delivered meals is rising. Probably what used to be 5 a day, we're getting 33 to 40 new intakes a day for home delivered meals. What we are trying to do is have those home delivered meal providers, which we have 9, to take their grab and go meals to the participant as they're delivering the home delivered meals. That way we don't have to have our participants come out into, you know, to the center. The AAA continues again to see the rise in referrals, and we are working on how to deal with and assist our providers just to maintain stability. So what they're doing is they're actually using each other. So as one home delivered meal provider gets to capacity, we're trying to reach out to other providers to pick up routes. We are engaging in conversations with our access provider. Are we there?
We are. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I'm blank. I don't see you guys. Okay.
No, you're fine.
Okay, I can't see you, but you can see me. This will, so as far as what it has done to identify shortcomings, I think that it's highlighted for the AAA and the provider network the need for contingency plans that expand beyond our emergency plans that are currently in place. Most of our emergency plans address disaster, buildings, issues, flooding. This really threw everybody for a curve, as we know. And, you know, right now, maybe as time goes on, I don't know what the PFPC members can do for us right now, but we may be able to identify needs, you know, long term. So.
Thank you so much. I'm looking to see if there are any questions to answer specifically. I'm not seeing any specific questions. If anyone has a question for Carolyn, please type them in the side relating to seniors and congregate meals. And how
Excuse me, Dawn.
Mhm.
Just a question just popped up.
Are enough measures in place to protect food delivery staff, volunteers, and clients from the COVID-19 transmission? Recommendations are easy to ignore when overworked. It's a great point.
Yeah, that is a great point. And again, we're taking every step. Like I said, eventually we'd like to go to 1 day a week delivery, like delivering 5 meals in 1 day, so we can eliminate as much exposure as we possibly can. Most consumers don't want to see us, don't want to open the door when we're there. So again, we hang the bag on the door and then we stand back or go to the car and then just make sure they picked it up. We call ahead to make sure they're there to take the meal. Some of our boroughs have asked consumers to put out bags, you know, cooler bags, so that we can put the meal in there and then leave. So, you know, at this point, yes, you know, I believe so. But as the time goes on, people are fearful, and our volunteers are older as well, and they're fearful.
Are there ways, I'll ask a question, are there ways to, what are your channels for soliciting additional volunteers? And
Well,
I had
for
a
the-
question around, we've heard a concern and need for additional protective equipment. And I know Donna will speak to this from a food safety point of view, but do you see any need for additional equipment? That's something we've been in touch with Global Links about.
At this point for us, I do not see a need for additional equipment. Right now, I think the volunteers, we can't just take any volunteers because they have to have the criminal background checks, they have to go through that whole system, and then they have to be trained. So I think that's why we're kind of tapping into each other and our entire network right now. Working with Access, all of their drivers currently have, you know, those clearances as well.
I see, so you have a backup mechanism, yeah.
We do, and
Okay.
I heard another borough today talk about their fire department that was helping them deliver. So when I talk about capacity, it's just, we can get the meals to the people, it's just the cars. So we need people to drive the cars, but yet we have to protect our older adults to make sure that, you know, we have all our clearances.
I see, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and move to our next speaker, and I want to remind folks, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And I'm going to introduce Amy Mallon and or Ashley Verado, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Hi, Dawn. This is Amy Mallon. I can give our updates, and I don't think I'll take my full time. Hi, everyone. This is my first time joining the Food Policy Council. So I am an assistant deputy in our Office of Community Services. So day to day, I oversee our family and community support. So our family support centers, out of school time programs, child care subsidy, etc. I say that to say that I am not the expert in food or food policy, but am sort of coordinating our efforts at DHS related to food access. So differing from what Carolyn just shared, where DHS really is the leader and the owner in senior food and making sure that seniors are fed in our county, we don't play that role to the sort of general population. And so our role in this work has really been mostly around coordination and communication across our broad network of providers and in close contact with the food bank and other key players. So a couple key updates on what we've been up to. We have established a standing meeting on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3:30. We have several folks join that call, many of whom are probably on this call also, and I can put the call-in information in the chat or in the notes afterwards. And it's really, we share any updates we have. Folks submit questions that they want to discuss that are relevant for the group, and then we have providers give updates. So it's really just meant to be a place where we can come together and talk about what challenges folks are facing and how they're addressing those. We've also put together a map, and I'll also put the link in the chat after this call. In the first few weeks, there were, in the first week, there must have been hundreds of lists generated of food distribution points across Allegheny County, which was wonderful. People wanted to make sure that people knew how to be connected, but with exposure risks and just seeing where folks were showing up, those sites were popping up and down really quickly, and so they were becoming quickly outdated. So the map that we've put together has a mechanism to enter in new sites into it, let us know if you've tried to go to a site and it's wrong. It's got a link on how to get connected and support in applying to SNAP and other benefits. And so we're really, really promoting use of that map as sort of the most up-to-date resource in the county. And then really our role beyond that is to facilitate connections between various parties in the county, just knowing that we support a lot of providers, have contracts with a lot of folks, and are connected in a lot of ways. So we put out a survey to assess needs and ways to support, and sent that back out to the various stakeholders that are supporting food access in some way. We've been trying to facilitate connections between school districts and community partners that want to support with transportation and distribution. So we've been spending some good time there. We're trying to compile data, so there's a lot of surveying happening across the county again, to hear directly from households and families about what their needs are. We have a pretty strong analytics team, so I'm happy to pull in any data that folks have and want help digesting and trying to share that out broadly with the community. And then we've been partnering really closely with the United Way, because they both are coordinating a volunteer effort that's meant to have a food first focus. So they have desperately, so if anyone knows of organizations that are looking for volunteers, they have a lot of volunteers that are eagerly looking to help. So we've been partnering closely with them on that. And then also, obviously, they run our local 211, and their calls have greatly increased. And so we've been partnering with them specifically to put some sort of process in place to make sure there's sort of a system of last resort. So whether it's a household that's COVID-19 positive, and so they truly can't leave the house to get food and they don't have the means to order delivery, or for some other reason, the household is homebound, that we can ensure that, if we try there's a pantry near you here, or there's a school here, and none of those work, that we have a system in place to make sure that every household will receive the food that it needs. I think that those are the major updates from DHS more broadly, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. And I do just want to commend the work of those of you at Allegheny County. I've been very myself reassured at the leadership that's been expressed through this process. And my hope is to hear where there are gaps that we can, as a broad community, figure out how to connect resources where needed and come up with new ideas. I also wanted to lift up something that Helen shared, which is that Lawrenceville United is signing people up. They've launched a buddy system in their original 3 Pittsburgh communities of Garfield, Bloomfield, and Lawrenceville. And they're working in partnership with Operation Better Block and Rebuilding Together Pittsburgh to expand that buddy system network. So I think, as we're going day by day and having that touch point and reaching out to neighbors, that's a kind of a grassroots system as well, kind of making sure that people are helping one another and being in touch. I want to just see if there's any questions that were raised here.
Yeah, there's one from Hannah about the family support centers. I can take that. So we have a network of 28 family support centers around the county. The physical buildings are all closed per guidance, but many of them have received deliveries of diapers and formula, and that's something I should have noted. We're going to try to get that information onto the food map because they're all willing to be access points for the broader community. So they're still supporting families, but the physical locations are closed.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Okay, yeah, and Pittsburgh Cares has also established a buddy volunteer system. Okay, great. And I know there's a lot of mutual aid happening, neighborhood-based and beyond. Okay, so I think we'll move on to our next speaker, Donna Sharding with the Allegheny County Health Department's Food Safety Program.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are still working. We're doing our best. So as soon as we recognized we couldn't conduct business as usual, we began meeting with our staff and setting up the most expedient forms of communication. We're all working through teams. As with all emergencies, we do see our role as providing guidance to both the food industry and the public. And we do also have to remember that we're part of public health response too, which is possibly unique working for the health department versus just Department of Agriculture or someone who's only enforcing food regulations. So as with all our emergencies, again, our personal contact is usually what we start with, making phone calls and emails, and it remains our best method for reaching a larger audience with the least amount of time. Our first focus was for contact with the school districts. We recognized that they were scrambling, trying to determine how to get the food out to the public. Community-based food facilities and residential facilities, those were the primary focus at the beginning. Each time the governor changed his directives, we had to shift our focus. Sometimes it was hourly. We spent, all kinds of time setting up what we needed to do, and then it changed. In addition to remote contact, we do have a core group of staffs that are making spot checks. These are typically results of phone conversations. We might recognize that an operator or an individual has a lot of questions or doesn't seem to be following the guidance that's being provided. So we will send our staff out to follow up on these individuals. We are following up on complaints, primarily COVID-related complaints. And then we're also conducting safety assessments. Right now, our focus is on the facilities that are open for life-sustaining response to the community. Certification, our food safety certification, unfortunately, has to be suspended for now. We're talking about education, maybe if we can find some software that the county will let us use, put some training up, webinars, type of web training, whatever we can do. We're not going to be able to provide the examinations that we had hoped to do, but at least we can get the training out there. We've suspended our comprehensive routine inspections. Our focus are the safety assessments and making sure that we have safety systems in place for the facilities that are open. Most of the staff now, as of this week, are working remotely. We have just a skeleton crew in the office. Our IT department did a tremendous job for pushing out software. So our staffs can now access our network files and they can use their laptops to make phone calls rather than their personal cell phones. All of the communications that we are conducting is through Teams. We have daily meetings and management team meetings. We're posting all of our questions up on the team site. We are posting latest guidance so that everybody's working and pulling together. I have to say that the exercise in working remotely has demonstrated to us that it is possible. It has helped us identify policies and guidance that needs to be put in place, expectations that need to be stressed for this sort of work. So some of the things that we have had chains reach out to us with their policies, and we're working with them to kind of tweak what is in place and giving them updates as needed. We connected the Restaurant and Lodging Association with our operators. They were running out of supplies for like disinfecting wipes and sanitizer, things that they needed for the public, not necessarily for operations. They have suppliers for that. So they came up with some good ideas for supplies. The mobile community, I know they organized a nonprofit organization, and they were hoping to help connect food with need. I asked Tim Tobish to contact you, Dawn. I don't know if he did that. And try to find out where the greatest need was. So they are out there. They are available if anybody needs that type of food delivery. What else? Farm markets. We're starting to focus on the farm markets. We know that's going to happen soon. The city has been putting guidance together, and Shelley Danko Day, I've been in touch with her, and she's connected me with the people that are putting the guidance together. So the city, I think, is looking pretty good. We have to figure out how to get the communications out to the communities now that have their own farmers markets. That will be the next step. What else? We haven't had any regulatory or policy changes. We're just responding with the guidance that we have and interpreting the rules for people and just making sure that that we're able to answer their questions.
Donna, are you seeing restaurant owners expressing any specific needs from your point of view?
I think the only thing that really came up so far was sanitizing wipes for things, sanitizer. We got some creative staff. They help them set up sanitizing buckets, and they can use sanitizer. They don't have to buy expensive wipes. And it would be the same for the farm markets and any of those community outreach efforts that you're doing. You can set up sanitizing buckets, and they'll do the same job. You don't need to buy those wipes. That was the first thing that really jumped out, I think, right away.
Great. And I know there are some distilleries that have been producing hand sanitizer. That was something we spoke earlier today with the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association about a need that they've heard at the state level for sanitizer. And so that was a connection point, increasing the supply. So that we'll continue to see that, I think, in our region as well. I don't see any.
The FDA did put out guidance on that, so we can make sure that we have a safe product. We do have to be careful if they're using it in the kitchens. We don't know if it would be considered an adulterant if it got into the food. But as far as customers and the public, it's great. It's a great way to meet that need.
Wonderful. Can you share what the... Oh, yeah. What do you mean by sanitizer bucket? I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
I know. We have to stop and think about what we're talking about. So a lot of food facilities, they'll set up a bucket of sanitizing solution. They can use bleach, or there are other approved chemicals. And it's just a solution that you can dip a rag in, leave your rag right in there, and your cloth. That sounds a little bit better. Leave the cloth in there, and that can be used in the same manner that a sanitizing wipe could be used. You just need to change it regularly.
I've seen some guidance on what should be in those formulas. If anyone has that information you want to post in the chat, that might be helpful. I don't know if Donna, you have that or anybody else does, or if
Yeah,
anyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. I think I do. I could probably forward that.
Okay, that'd be great. If you want to just paste the link in the chat, that'd be wonderful. Okay, so let's keep moving here. Next, we have Dora Walmsley, who's with Allegheny County Economic Development.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So Allegheny County Economic Development has also transitioned to a remote work setup, something that I think the county wasn't ever prepared to do before. But as Donna mentioned, our computer services and IT teams have been working pretty diligently and have enabled us all to maintain pretty robust operations in a remote setting. So we're grateful to them and grateful to be able to work safely. Our kind of role in economic development throughout this time has mostly been around maintaining operations with our existing grantees for the CDBG and other state funding programs to ensure people are getting paid out. And then within my role in the business development division, I've been fielding an increasing number of emails and calls from small businesses seeking resources. So really, from our perspective, we have suspended principal and interest payments for existing borrowers. We're not making any new loans or anything like that at this time, but obviously suspended those payments, as many lenders have done. Traditional banks, I know the URA and Bridgeway and others have suspended those payments as well for their borrowers. At the same time, we're working with banks and foundations and other state and local economic development organizations to capitalize a recovery fund. So we really see at this time the first line of defense for small businesses being those kind of federal and state resources, in addition to those smaller funds that have popped up that we've seen through either Hebrew Free Loan or Honeycomb Credit, or the many others that have popped up. So we're really, again, referring people to the SBA's EIDL loan, the disaster loan program. Now through the CARES Act, we're working to understand that, what that'll look like, how folks are going to be able to access those loan programs. And then we really see our role at economic development as taking part in the recovery. So again, we're working with those banks and foundations at the local level and throughout the state to capitalize the recovery fund. I think it's something like maybe around half of businesses that apply for disaster loans that we've seen through like Ivan or other kind of natural disasters are denied for one reason or another through the SBA program. So perhaps they don't have the collateral or the personal guarantee to access those sources. So we're working again to capitalize that fund so we can be there to kind of offer assistance to those people that are denied federal and state loan programs. So while we're working on building that capital fund, we're working through our municipalities and our small business communities to understand what their needs are at this time, and then what their capital needs are starting to look like. So to really understand, okay, we want to build this fund, but how much capital is going to be needed for that. So part of that survey includes, what are their current needs, and we're obviously hearing, as everybody is hearing, that folks are having aren't able to pay rent, aren't able to pay utilities. Among if they've laid off workers, they're obviously not making payroll and kind of just not making those basic. Aren't able to meet their basic operational needs. And in the case of people that are self-employed, maybe don't have employees or kind of laid them off early on, in many cases their income is zero. So we're referring them to obviously the human service type resources that are out there for emergency food assistance and other areas, and then just encouraging people to be proactive, talk to their landlords. It's terrible advice to give, but the fact that the courts are essentially closed means like evictions can't take place. So, that's something, I guess. but also advocating and lobbying for those kind of rent freezes for commercial businesses as well, which current moratoriums aren't covering for commercial entities. Some other quick things: the Urban Redevelopment Authority at the city level has been really great in coordinating weekly check-in meetings with the city's business district managers. We have taken part in that to understand what the needs are at that level. They've also coordinated a buy gift card campaign, so similar to what some maybe saw on this call during World War II times. The kind of buy war bond campaigns were really encouraging people to buy gift cards for businesses that either are still operating in a takeout setting or aren't operating at all because they had to shut their doors. So I would look for that. At the county level, we're coordinating similar efforts to kind of jump on that as well. But the URA has also been, has taken on kind of aggregating those resources for small businesses as well. So in an effort not to throw out like a million websites, the EDOs at the local level have really been directing people to the URA's website. There's a lot, and I saw that Rebecca at Sustainable Pittsburgh put something up in the chat. There's a lot of confusion around the CARES Act. There's a lot of confusion and backlog in the SBA's website to apply for the disaster loans. Systems are bogged down. SBA is recommending paper applications in some cases. So we also see our role at the county, and my role in particular, as being able to provide that technical assistance. So, if there's individuals or business owners that are having trouble navigating those systems or aren't sure what to apply for, in some cases, if you apply for one loan, you're ineligible for others. So it's really important, and it's frustrating because at this time you don't want to be dealing with this kind of bureaucratic nonsense, but it's important that people are really thoughtful and diligent in what they're applying for, in ensuring that their applications are complete, because it can go through a 30-day process, and on day 27, if there's missing information, that'll get kicked back to the small business owner, and they'll have to start all over again, essentially. So we're here to help in terms of providing that technical assistance. If folks have a relationship with their local lenders, that's a really good place to start. And then as we get guidance on unemployment insurance for self-employed individuals and guidance on the new loan programs that are coming out of the CARES Act, we'll certainly be here to help with that as well. I guess the only other thing that I want to mention, because I was on a call earlier about it, there are a number of fraud, like scams taking place as a result of all this. So being really mindful of particularly elderly populations that are being targeted around Medicaid scams. People getting phone calls saying that you'll get a free test kit, a free COVID test kit if you provide your social security number. That's a scam. Small businesses being targeted for certain loans, again, seeking social security numbers. So just, I think, general PSA, don't provide your social security number. Also, I'm hearing that certain malware is being put on phones via fake COVID link. So again, being careful on what you're clicking on your phone too. I feel like nothing can happen to my phone personally, so it was a good wake-up call when I heard that. So that's a lot of information.
Thank you, Dora. And there was a request in the chat to drop any links to resources that you might have mentioned or that should be included. And also there was a question around those farm and agricultural businesses that might not qualify for the disaster relief that you were talking about. I think you find the comment, if you know anything more to share there. Curious if Dora has advice for farm and agriculture businesses who do not currently qualify for SBA disaster loans.
Yeah, I know that there were a lot of exceptions with the particular EIDL disaster loan. So I think and I'll have to go back. I'm not 100% on this, but I don't know if that those same exclusions apply to this particular disaster loan. So that's something that they would definitely want to recheck the regulations on, and certainly something that I'm happy to do as well. There's also the state level working capital loan program that Governor Wolf had announced a few days ago. I don't think that has any exclusionary measures for agriculture related activities.
Those might be some things that Adrian, who asked the question, and Dora, if you want to connect offline, we're happy to help facilitate that if you don't already know one another. And I'm seeing here, we're definitely, just to everyone's asking about, where, just anxieties around capturing all of these details, and just to assure you that we will be putting together a overview with links to all of these resources. So don't feel like you have to be quickly jotting down. I mean, feel free, but we will be following up with that. And also, Nikki from Craft at Chatham University wanted to share that they're developing a survey to compile information from farms and farmers to share with consumers with hopes of increasing. Right, so basically a survey trying to assess the needs of farmers in this time, because there's a lot of concern we'll hear later about access to consumers and markets. So that link of that survey is there, and if you know farmers, you can get that out, that'd be wonderful. I'm also hearing a lot about surveys. I'm curious, all that kind of information is very useful. So as we go forward, kind of reviewing what kind of information we might have been gathering, there might be future opportunities to share out some of our learnings as a community. So I want to go ahead. I think we can go ahead to the next. Thank you for sharing your contact, Dora. Our next speaker is Lindsay Powell with the Mayor's Office in the city of Pittsburgh. Let me see if I can find you, Lindsay.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, good.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Powell. I serve as the Assistant Chief of Staff to Mayor Peduto. Thank you so much for having me on the call. At this point, a lot of the resources that I was going to share at this point might be a little redundant. I do thank you, Dora, for bringing up the URA. I sit on the board of directors there, and they've been working really tirelessly to make sure that existing borrowers as well as future borrowers will be able to do so with ease, and knocking down a lot of the barriers that small businesses, particularly in this difficult time, may face. So right now, we are not collecting on any interest on our loans out there. We've not put any processing fees as typically we would. So I know that that website is posted within the chat, but if anyone has any questions or needs any clarity on how to utilize those resources, please don't hesitate to contact myself or the folks at the URA. For the city, what we've been doing is working very closely with the county to open up our senior centers and rec centers to complement some of the meal distribution that Pittsburgh Public Schools has. So PPS started off with about 50 schools, have dwindled down to 30 for concerns of just limiting the possible exposure to both staffers that are working some of those school meal distribution sites, as well as children and young people who utilize them. But as a reminder, there are schools that are opened in all of their districts. There are about 30 at this point now, from 11 to 1 p.m. Students, no matter if you go to that particular school, and frankly, if you are in school or not, you can take as many meals as you need. It's Monday, Tuesday, Friday. And they don't ID young people or children. It's just merely take what you need. And the city has taken up a similar model at our rec centers and Counter Salvation Army centers, as well as our senior centers. I can leave the actual center names and information within the chat as well. We've also been working with some of the larger food distributions that aren't particularly city food or PPS food, with the food bank and 412 Food Rescue, particularly on the safety side, working to coordinate obviously traffic and having officers available to maintain social distancing and things like that. But we've been trying to serve as a connector in a lot of spaces where we get particularly my office, or I'll get calls saying, this group here needs a meal distribution. This group here is, might have some food insecurity issues, and we've been trying to fill in the gaps that way. As this continues on, we're incredibly open and willing to be innovative in this space. So if there are things that we've been seeing other cities do outside of Pennsylvania that have been really creative, I want to give a tremendous shout out to 412 Food Rescue. They did a pilot, I guess a week back at this point, where they were modeling if rather than having students come to schools, doing this kind of school bus distribution. So kids who would typically go to their bus stop when school was in session, having a school bus come and give them meals as needed, rather than having people congregate in one point, which again is the model we're working with now. But there obviously, as this continues and ramps up, concerns about unneeded exposure. So we're at the city excited as much as you can be to be innovative in this space. We're tasked, and particularly my office is tasked with thinking more critically about our vulnerable Pittsburghers and how we can be more proactive and intentional about reaching them. Another point that I wanted to bring up that might be germane to this group, but since it was my last call, it's on the top of my mind, about our homeless and unhoused population right now. We've been working really closely with the county, as well as a lot of the providers, Operation Safety Net and others, Mercy, to ensure that we are providing as much support and other resources within some of our known camps. And so we put up water buffaloes, hand cleaning stations, increased our efforts to do housing there as well. Housing in terms of folks who may be interested in immediate housing, trying to get more folks out there to do some client outreach. But that's another population, looking at trends in other cities that we're deeply concerned about, but have been really mobilizing a robust network of folks in this space to ensure that, homeless folks and unhoused folks at this point are not left out of the conversation. We've increased ability to do food distributions at the known camps the camps that we know as well. So I won't ramble on because I can, but I will leave my information in the chat as well. If there are any questions, concerns, I love to say non-personal attacks, things that I can address on behalf of the city, I'm happy to. Thank you so much for having us on this call. Thanks
so much, Lindsay. I had one quick question, which I'm not sure if it would be for Lindsay or Malik, but I know there have been some examples nationally of school buses and bus routes being used to, instead of transporting students, be transformed into transporting meals to kids. And I know that, this might be a little more challenging in the city, but I wondered if that was something that's being looked into, using that infrastructure and those, existing support for that transportation network that would have been in place for school students, repurposing it for food delivery.
Absolutely. I don't want to speak on behalf of PPS, but we've been keeping in contact probably weekly, if not daily, about just how, again, the city can support their efforts. At this point, the model of congregating for grab and goes at schools has been working really well. But from talking to leadership at PPS, they're as well open to, if things need to shift, if things need to change, if we need to think how we're distributing food, then they're open to it. But we have seen other cities take on that model, and it's definitely in the back of our mind.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think our next speaker is Malik Hamilton from PPS Food Service. And before we kick off on this, I actually wanted to ask Malik, Crystal, who I think you're on the call here, had from Duquesne School District, had asked a question through our member survey about if there are places for school districts in the region to be connecting and sharing ideas and things like that. And I don't know if that's something that you are connected to, Malik, at PPS, or if you know of existing conversation places where people in the region are getting together as districts.
I know of a couple of places that I don't have in front of me because I'm not in my office, but if anybody wants to email me, I'll put my email in the chat, and definitely reach out to me and see if I know if that's appropriate and get people connected. I will speak real fast.
You're breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure. Try again.
Yeah, this is, for some reason, this has been happening today. I don't know why, but as far as the bus, using bus, the current problem that we are, with the buses, the current problem that we're running into is that the majority of those buses are contracted out, and we don't employ those drivers. So it would be up to the companies that own those vehicles to kind of help make that happen. At the moment, we're actually serving at 17 sites as we continue to consolidate down based on need and usage of the site. So if we have a site that's only serving 7 or 8 students a day, and there's a site closer that's serving 45 or 50, that makes more sense to shut down the one and consolidate over the one.
Malik, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second and use a little trick that Helen taught us the other day. Either you could dial in using your cell phone, or we could, would that maybe be a possibility? Do we have the number, Kiana, he can call? Is your phone also having trouble, Malik?
I don't know if my phone is or not. I haven't tried that.
If we could all try to shut off our videos, especially if we're not sharing currently, that may open up some bandwidth.
Right, okay. We can turn back on as soon as Malik is done. Maybe it'll just be a one-time. Let's see if that's better. You just go to the, there we go.
Look for the number. At the moment, we're serving grab and go at 17 schools. We also are providing meals for 17 sites. We consider them off-site locations, but they're through various organizations. Normally, our off-site meal service locations are through the city. We partner with City Parks for with their sites, and that is something. There were some churches and some other organizations that had reached out, and we were able to get them approved as locations, and so we're providing for them as well. If a site is willing, so if there's an organization that's wanting to get meals from the district, I can now, as of this afternoon, say that if they can get on with City Parks, then City Park has already approved site with as far as reimbursement and things like that to meet regulations, and we are a vendor for City Park, so that would allow for us to handle to help out with more organizations getting food out to them. To this point, we've been operating kind of in emergency mode because we've been going at 2-week spots. Are closed for 2 weeks and then another 2 weeks. Today, with the announcement that it's going to be more long term, we're actually able to start transitioning with the students transitioning to online learning. We're currently discussing how we can move to kind of a more static menu that'll allow us to offer more fresh fruits and vegetables and things of that manner that we haven't been doing up to this point. Because there were some waivers that were issued by the USDA and PDE that made it possible for us to do a lot of this as far as non-congregate feeding and being able to give meals to anybody that should come up and ask and be in need. There is going to be a slight gap because of spring break. So because the district is going to take its normal spring break that was already scheduled, we won't be operating during those days. We are on This Friday, because of one of those waivers, we're able to, on Friday, we will be handing out 4 meals at a time. So like Lindsay was saying, have been serving on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. And on Tuesdays and Fridays, we give multiple meals. We'll be giving more than we normally would this coming Friday to help with that gap over the spring break. Our biggest gap right now is the availability of protective masks when requested by staff. And I did see where there is a possibility that there's going to be a need for everybody to have masks when they're out in public. So we're trying to figure out a way to have protective masks available for our staff. So if there's any resource for that anybody knows of, we'd love to hear about that. Long term is still pretty fluid for us in respect that the current school year that we're providing grab-and-go meals through the end of April. The district is making arrangements for staff to be able to work remotely so that we can more efficiently make all of this happen. May is still in question, a big question mark for us, since as we continue to have to plan for both the contingency that students will return to the classrooms and our department will return to regular service as of May 1st, while also understanding that we will return, or that there's a very real possibility that we will have to complete the scheduled school year in a grab-and-go mode. We are also planning for the start of summer meals programs right now, and are working with our distributors to have product available in time for that season of our operation. In addition to all of that, for our normal schedule of operations, we are also continuing to plan menus and service and for the start of the coming school year. This is kind of a busy part of the year for us, where we have to do a lot of things from a regulatory standpoint for USDA for the coming school year, even though we haven't finished this one yet. And so there's a lot going on that side of things as well. More attention and directives have been given to our department during this crisis than ever before, so that's a good thing. We're opening communication lines. Normally, we are able to run our operation according to the state and federal guidelines because that's the source of our funding. And in this situation, there have been times when we've had to, we've received directives from from the district higher ups or whoever else that allowed us to serve our standard procedures. One that highlighted again.
You just went real scrambly again. Maybe just say that last sentence again.
The one thing that's really come to light that we've talked about and with some folks in this chat already is that regulations in the how and where we serve food, and that's a big thing that as we move forward long term that we're hoping to be able to better educate folks as to how things are operating for us, because it has caused some concerns and misunderstandings with folks in the public as to why we're doing things the way that we're doing and why we have to do them the way we're doing them.
Malik, the first part of what you were just saying, which sounded like it was very important, was sort of technotroned out of understandable language. Either maybe type it in on the side, or maybe you could restate, but maybe type in on the side what your concern and what the need is that we need to educate the public about.
I can definitely do that.
And I don't know if you had more to say, or if there were.
No, that's it.
That was it. Okay. Let's see. And there's questions around your news around connecting with city parks. Is there a contact point person that organizations should be in touch with at city parks that, to kind of expand sites that you would recommend?
I would recommend Carly. I think Carly's last name is Gettleman. Let me see if I can find her contact while I'm sitting here.
Okay, great.
I'll get that. If I don't find it, I'll get it posted and sent over to you, Don, so that we can add it to the stuff going out later.
Great. And it looks like there's some clarifications around some of the waivers that have come through, that children don't actually have to be present to be picking up meals. There aren't questions asked around, you know, who exactly is receiving the meal. The meals are just being shared out. Let's see. And then there's some questions around where to donated supplies that are being sewn, masks and things, where do they go? And there's some conversation. So on the chat is also the thank you for adding the name of the person at City Parks to connect with. That'd be great if we could expand those. Do you know, Malik, if sort of emergency food providers are aware of the spring break? Because I think I could envision an increased demand on food needs that might surpass the 4 extra meals or whatever that you're distributing this Friday. Just the communications around that. And you know, do the students know that, and families know that meals won't be available next week?
So we've been trying to communicate as best. Oops. Communicate the best that we can to everyone. Part of the problem throughout all of this is sometimes what gets reported in the news is different than what is being on websites.
Gotcha. So try to keep communications channels clear. And I know that the district has its own website. Maybe we could put the district website on the side here. It would be a go-to place for that accurate information. Okay, so let's keep going. We're only a little bit behind at this point. And our next speaker, thank you, Malik. Our next speaker is Denny from the food bank. And I don't know, I think we weren't having trouble before. If people want to turn their video back on, they can. Or if you want to keep off, that's fine. Oh, you're muted, Denny.
Okay, I'll go. With regard to the food bank end of things, it's important, I think, to point out that 85% of the work that we do is really done through our pantry network. And knock on wood, to date, we've been able to keep that, pretty robust, despite the fact that in the last 2 weeks, the burden on those folks has grown by about 30%. At the food bank itself, at our warehouse, we've had a 5-time increase in walk-ins, things are not going to get a whole lot better in terms of the demand for services. I think most of you have heard that, we have now surpassed something like 6 times what the number of people were that applied for unemployment compensation this last March. So this has led to some changes, and I'll talk about the subtractions first. We have, for now, postponed all of our produce to people distributions. We have postponed all of our greengrocer stops. We are no longer accepting food from food drives. And we've added some things as well. The most public-facing one of those is something you may have seen if you saw the front page of today's Post-Gazette, and I think it's yesterday's Trib. We are doing mass distributions, I would say, in lieu of some of those other activities. And the reason for that is we've gone to what we call a drive-up model to maximize social distancing and to minimize the possibility of human beings actually interacting with each other, which leads to all sorts of adaptations, such as the one we're experiencing at this very moment. And so we are organizing those. It's a much more difficult endeavor than doing our P2Ps, which we had pretty much had down to science. We're learning some new things about, for example, where to position porta potties if you're going to have a lot of people driving and actually being in line for sometimes extended periods of time. We also have established, and I want to refer everyone to this because things are constantly changing, a COVID-19 webpage where we're continually updating other changes and other mass distribution sites as we can get them organized. I think, like Lindsay pointed out earlier, we have relied on the assistance of some of our local police forces, most notably in the city of Pittsburgh, for our distribution on North Side last week, and for a distribution we're organizing for this Thursday adjacent to the PPG arena. One of the interesting things is that we have not had a need for volunteers. We are encouraging people, if they want to volunteer, to please still go to our website and register there. But we have not had to call upon a lot of volunteers, partially because we've now asked volunteers not to come into our building, which again was done for health and safety purposes, both regarding the staff and the volunteers. And we, at least for the time being, have a large enough cadre of willing volunteers to help with the distributions. The other thing that we've had to do as a change, because we're simply getting so many calls for assistance, is we pulled originally 2 of our nutrition experts off of that duty and assigned them to be our COVID concierges. So they are sort of triaging requests that come in, both to help and needing help. We've now, again, because of the volume of those calls, pulled another one of our staff members into that. The other big change is my boss, Lisa, who usually doesn't seek the limelight, has been on MSNBC and CNN today. So we're getting, obviously, a lot of attention for the problem we're dealing with and for some of the work we're doing to address it. We've also been working with our partners across the country at Feeding America and closer to home with our friends at Feeding Pennsylvania to take advantage of some of the linkages that they have for acquiring food. Our friends at Central PA Food Bank have organized in collaboration with the Department of Agriculture a repacking factory, if you will, at the Pennsylvania Farm Show building. So we're anticipating getting some product from them. If I had to identify a single need for us at the moment, it is for food. And specifically, and if everybody wants to, get out your checkbook now and write a check, for food that we purchase. As I get into the policy piece, I'm going to be able to talk about some of the federal resources that we hope to get in the coming weeks. But right now, we're really crunched for food. And again, since we're not having food drives, we're encouraging people to donate money for us to purchase food in bulk. Moving on to the policy front, there's obviously been a lot of activity here. There was the original, well, actually, it goes back to March 13th when, thank goodness, the courts said that all those nasty SNAP provisions that were supposed to go in on April Fool's Day were going to be blocked. And so that was obviously good news. With regard to the Families First, which I guess you might want to call phase 2 of the federal COVID legislation, there was some funding in there for the food programs, about or $500 million for WIC, $250 million for senior nutrition programs, and $400 million for TFAP, which is the Emergency Food Assistance Program, which makes government commodities available excuse me, to food banks. And a key element of that was, for the first time in a long time, they actually funded the total authorized amount for storage and distribution. Typically, the feds will give you the food, but then leave it up to you to figure out how to pay for moving it. So that was in that the Phase 2 Act. The CARES Act that was just approved included another $450 million for TFAP commodities, $400 million for FEMA under food and shelter, some additional money for CDBG, and $900 million for LIHEAP, which, while not a food program, is certainly a program that helps those people that we serve. The other element of that I guess is worth mentioning is it included $150 billion to states and localities, although at this point it's unclear where exactly that gets targeted. I bring that up because, one of the issues the state is obviously dealing with right now is with the liquor stores closed and casinos closed, and unemployment rising incredibly, therefore reducing the amount coming in for personal income tax, and people not shopping, so the sales tax is dropping. So Pennsylvania is really going to be facing an incredible challenge in trying to make it through this fiscal year, and especially planning for the next one. So it remains to be seen what kind of resources might be available for food and nutrition from the Commonwealth moving forward. The other biggies that have happened that I wanted to point out, and one was the granting by the U.S. Department of Agriculture of what they call the disaster household distribution, which means that as those cars pull up, we no longer have to ask them a 27-word question, and if they say yes, read them a 95-word disclaimer, and after that, ask them 5 questions, which, as you might imagine, would hold up a line of cars rather significantly. The other thing is, and this is the most recent one, and I guess the last one I will mention, is the granting by President Trump of Governor Wolf's request for a major disaster declaration. And that was just granted, I don't know, a day ago. No, actually, it's last night, now that I think about it. And, while it remains to be seen, at least by me, because I've been having a hard time tracking this down, what else is included in that, again, having to do with food, it does allow the state to begin operation of what's called DSNAP, or Disaster Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which makes it much, much easier for people to qualify and receive that assistance. And then the very last thing I'm going to mention is, looking on the horizon, there is talk of a phase 4 COVID bill done in Washington. And I'd like to invite people to sort of pay attention to what's happening with that, if for no other reason than it may be an opportunity to achieve something we were not able to achieve in the prior COVID bills, which is actually getting an increase in the SNAP benefit, which is something that again, we've been trying for, and it just hasn't been included. There is talk, like I said, about this. I think today, Speaker Pelosi mentioned that she wanted it to be a major infrastructure bill, but we'd like to see some improvements to SNAP finally make it into that legislation. Some people in Washington were promised that when they went along with this phase 3 bill. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Jen.
I just wanted to add one quick thing before we turn it to Jen, which is that there have been a lot of questions from farmers, retailers, and SNAP users. Since you can't use SNAP electronically to do online purchases and prepay, is that a rule that we could figure out? And Ann Sanders at Just Harvest has been in conversation with the USDA, and I just wanted to put their answer to online purchase. Yeah, I just wanted to paste that there.
I was going to say, I'm not sure how to answer that. I have read the messages back and forth, except to say that the person that was referred to, or at least the regional office that was referred to, is headed up by, in Robbinsdale, New Jersey, but it's headed up by a woman named Pat Dombrowski, who we have always found to be incredibly cooperative. So I think if there's a way to walk through that process, she would be more than willing to do that for us.
Yeah, it seems like there's some kind of exceptions that states could pursue. And so I think pushing on that, and that's a really helpful contact to move that forward, because I think this is a real concern for a lot of people.
Yeah, I just want to pop in on that. Senator Toomey's aide reached out to me today on the legislation that we've been talking about before this happened, just to see how things were. And I brought that up to him, that this is a real impediment for people who are receiving those benefits. And he seems surprised by it. So I don't think it hurts to let other lawmakers know that this is an issue. And it probably has never occurred to them that this is something that they could do something about. I mean, I'm sure those that are deep in the world that you're talking about, Denny, do. But the rest of the lawmakers may not realize how serious of a problem that is.
And let me take that opportunity, because I should have said this before, but to get that disaster household distribution, we had to get Secretary Perdue, who was slow walking all of these state requests for waivers. I mean, he said at one point he was going to personally review every one of them rather than having anyone else in the department help him. Every member of the Pennsylvania delegation, Senate and House, worked to get that thing loose. And I've never experienced where you had that kind of unanimity, especially in today's polarized political atmosphere. So if you run into any of those folks, say, hey, thanks.
Yeah, get them on this case. Okay, go ahead, Jen.
Yep.
So we are, of course, seeing an increased need as well as a complete disruption in our pre-COVID operations. We distributed, just to give you an idea, we had a pop-up distribution of produce today in conjunction with Cisco. We distributed 12,000 pounds of produce in 90 minutes. So we're just seeing an absolute need out there. Our donors, we have only about 55% of our donors are still operating right now. We have a lot of food coming in. We've got changed patterns of donations. So that 55% is not going to translate to a 55% loss this month or possibly even next month. I don't know what long-term that's going to look like. We're seeing a shift that is requiring us to be really nimble about our operations. Similarly, with our distribution partners, I think we only have 45% left that are functioning at the capacity they were prior to this crisis. And that's not including things like social distancing and personal protective equipment and things like that. A lot of our distribution points, because we work with sort of alternate distribution points, have shut down or have really restricted their operations. And one good example, which was mentioned earlier, would be the family support centers. And we work with all the family support centers that are funded by the county, and they've all shut down. That being said, many of them are finding alternate ways to distribute food. And I think that is the name of the game these days, is just finding out different ways to do things. We are piloting a lot of different distribution efforts. I think all of which have been mentioned today, but I'll run through them really quickly anyway. One is the bus stop distribution of meals. We have one coming up with the school district of Duquesne, and we're working with Allies for Children to look at other school districts in the area that want to distribute meals to children at their bus stops. Second, we're partnering closely with the food bank. We are doing a door-to-door distribution for senior boxes. We piloted that last week in Allegheny County and this week in Butler County, where our volunteers are using our technology and they're picking up senior boxes either from the food bank or from a satellite location, and then taking those to the people who normally would come get them that have indicated that they would like them. And I think we also did some emergency boxes as well. That is not something that we want necessarily public right now, because both the food bank and 412 are being inundated by calls for help, and we don't want that to go global and get slammed. But we are ramping that up to see how we can serve as many people as possible, with a particular focus on those that are homebound, those that are particularly vulnerable, those that might be quarantined because they're sick or tested positive, and those that are in transit deserts and areas of high need. We're also partnering with Allegheny County Housing Authority and Erin Hart through Farm to Table. Erin, if you're still on here, I sent you a text about this. There's been movement and I need to talk to you. To figure out how we can do something similar in some of the housing sites, because a lot of those are really cut off. They don't have access to the transportation in a lot of cases. A lot of them are trying to self-isolate. They can't order their food in because of SNAP restrictions. And we're hearing a lot of demand coming from those areas. So we're piloting that hopefully this week or next week, early next week, with ACHA, and we really want that to be a model for how we can hit some of these other locations that don't have access to traditional resources. We've also been working with we helped contribute to the map. We reached out to a lot of our partners to see if they're doing direct distribution, because there's been so much shifting landscape in terms of who's distributing food, and who's open to the public and what their rules for distribution are. So we've been working on getting that updated as well. And there was one other thing I was going to mention. Oh yeah, just from listening to everybody talk, we are seeing a complete revamping of our system and how we work, and we'd love to partner with any of you that are working to try to get food into your community or to the people you serve. Our technology is really good for that one-to-one distribution or many-to-one distribution, so we can, have our volunteers pick up at a central location and then take to your clients or the people that you're serving pretty easily. We've had a huge jump in volunteers. We had a 50% jump over the week before. I think it was last week or maybe the week before. I don't know. Time doesn't exist anymore. At some point recently, we had a major increase in our volunteer downloads, and that seems to be continuing. So there's a lot of people reaching out to help. I think the biggest issue now is that because it's not business as usual, we just need to form those partnerships with organizations so that we can implement these kinds of solutions really quickly. We can't do that without those partnerships. Also, funding is an issue. Having to completely change how our operations are working. Our fleet is running multiple shifts a day, which normally we're not a fleet organization. They are usually, maybe a quarter of our weight per month, but because we're trying to limit the contact of our volunteers, and really, a lot of our volunteers are seniors as well. And we're trying to protect them and keep them out of the field and make sure that it's all no contact donations. Our fleet is running. We've had to hire new drivers. We're buying personal protective equipment for them and so on. So I think that's just probably everybody's battle cry right now is, we need funding to be able to do what we can do.
Thanks so much, Jen. And we're running a little behind, so I want to just make sure that we shift gears. We have a little bit of a shift to more supply chain distribution and growing for our next 3 presenters. So I want to invite Celeste Taylor from Black Urban Gardeners and Farmers of Pittsburgh Co-op. And let me see if you can unmute yourself. Are you there, Celeste? I'm trying to find you on these pages of wonderful people. Let's see. Maybe she dropped off the call. I'm not sure. Let's move to our next presenter, and we can circle back around. Erin Hart from Farm to Table Western PA. Are you able to share?
Hi, everyone. I'm starting the video. Hi, how are you? Good to see everyone. Jen, thank you. I did get your text, so I'm looking forward to hearing back. I'll call you tomorrow. So we have been, as Farm to Table, we've been working on connecting farms to consumers. And that's primarily what we've done over the past 15 years. So when the sort of mainstream grocery stores started selling out of eggs and meat and cheese and milk, this is at a time when dairy farmers have been selling off their herds in record numbers all throughout the country. Even as of the fall and the winter, farms were contacting us saying, we had to move all of our cows to Virginia because we couldn't afford the feed. And now my sister says I have to take them all back. So I need to send some to the butcher because I can't afford any of this. Or farms were saying, I have 1,000 pounds of ground beef. I don't know what to do with it. And it wasn't USDA certified, so that it would have to be direct to consumer. And now they're all cleaning out their freezers and they're selling out of everything that they have. So what we have done, and what we are, part of what we do is sort of a brand campaign for Buy Fresh, Buy Local. We promote the Buy Fresh, Buy Local logo, which is a national brand. PASA in Pennsylvania actually owns it nationally. We're the Western PA chapter, the 30 counties. So that's what we're really promoting right now. April, we were going to start a CSA campaign anyway. Chatham, as someone previously mentioned, is putting together sort of a list of resources. I tried to do that 2 weeks ago, and every day the list just is constantly changing every morning and every night when I check, like who's selling what and how are they selling. It just is constantly changing. So we've been encouraging people to really get down to like your local neighborhood to get food. Places like the East End Food Co-op is usually like the #1 example of a retailer who buys local and sells local and tells people that they buy local and sell local. Eggs right now, and I know people say like I'm at the store and all the meat's gone, all the eggs are gone. I can tell you that farmers have so many eggs, like they don't even know what to do with them. So we've been connecting people to retailers, but also to getting consumers to start buying CSA shares now. I understand that there's a concern because of restaurants, basically some of them closing down, that they haven't been able to, farms have all these restaurants that had been buying from them. I see a lot of the farms already converting into either subscription boxes or CSA sales. And there are some local places like Harvey, which is a CSA software. They've kind of picked up where Penn's Corner left off. Someone was concerned that Paragon dropped Penn's Corner. I don't see that as a problem. Neil Stauffer is now working at Harvey with Simon Huntley, and they're selling out. Every time they send out a pop-up CSA box, it sells out within an hour. Clarion River Organics is not going away. Zeb is no longer going to be managing it. Nathan Holmes will be managing it, and Nathan is doing things like he just got Weatherbury Farms flowers into Market District. So there's a lot of people working behind the scenes. I sort of like collect these stories in a folder in my Outlook account, and I'm going to be sending out newsletters every week and a half. We share everything on our social media pages and on our blog. So I sent Carlin the link, but I can also copy it into the chat box. If you have anything that you want us to promote to our list, we have over 32,000 email addresses, and we have a lot of people that follow us on social media. So if the Food Policy Council is doing something, or Sustainable Pittsburgh, or Food Bank, the Pittsburgh Public Schools, anything that you want us to share that our audience would, could help you spread the word or could avail themselves of your services, please just email it to me directly. I will personally send it to the people who post on our blog, and I'm usually the one who writes our newsletters. So again, if you need anything from us, please let us know. That's why we're here. And we do also work in affordable housing. So I can tell you all the work that you guys are doing is fantastic. I'm so excited that Don and Carlin and everyone is out here working on it because people really need it. So thank you for including me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Erin. And Emily Schmidt-Lapp just from the Food Trust added that the mention of East End Food Co-op is the newest addition to the Food Bucks program, where shoppers using SNAP or food stamps can earn a $2 coupon for fresh produce for every $5 in fresh produce they purchase, which is an increase by 40% in buying power. So, and there's other retailers, and she linked the list in Western Pennsylvania here. And Shelley's also saying Paragon is still working with Penn's Corner farmers. They're just not doing a spring and summer CSA. So we're seeing other CSA models. And I think as you're mentioning, that's going to only need to increase. The only question I have for you quickly, Erin, is if people want to access those excess eggs and those excess, that meat and those products, where's the best place to find what might be available?
If you go to the farmtotablepa.com website and click on the various social media sites, our Facebook page and Instagram, you could go on, and we're probably posting on Facebook 15 or 20 times a day.
Gotcha. So you'll say X Farm has this available
Exactly.
today.
Or
Yeah.
if you just email me, and I will, I know, like, if you live in Ligonier, the closest place to get eggs. It's sad.
Okay. Okay.
'Cause I see it in my feed constantly. So please,
Great. Thank you.
personally reach out to me. And if you're getting food for, you know, senior buildings or, you know, for like soup kitchens and some of the places that are further out, we're trying to do sort of like a matchmaking to get the businesses that are interested in donating together with the nonprofit organizations, and just sort of, you know, having them run with it in all these different communities.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you so much.
Dawn, you're on mute.
Sorry. John, do you want to go ahead and share?
Yeah, sure. So Aaron had a lot of good information and resources, you know, talking about Harvey and the Chatham survey and stuff. So I'll try to be brief and just talk a little bit about what we're doing at the Allegheny County Conservation District, but also just remind people that next Tuesday we're having our Urban Ag Working Group meeting, and we're hoping to have like a nice deep dive into a lot of these conversations around, you know, pooling resources, pooling information, getting it out to people. So definitely want to encourage anybody who's interested to join us for that next week. Let's see. So the district is currently closed, the office, so we're all working from home, which means most of our technical assistance and farm preservation, anything but like core regulatory functions are sort of kind of on pause or remote for us. We're not really doing field work right now, and I'm a little disappointed, but I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to get back outside and start visiting farms again. But in terms of what we're doing, I'd say we're tracking changes to the local food system with regard to farmers. So in doing so, we're kind of looking at a few concerns. One is the loss of market access and revenue for particularly small, very small to medium farms. You know, people who sell at restaurants and markets, or do some direct sales, but also interested in connecting public to farms that have the capacity or the infrastructure to manage direct sales, either through an email address, or some people, you know, have set up online infrastructure, websites, and forms and things to connect people to CSAs, or even purchase and order directly and have it delivered or picked up. So, you know, kind of pooling those opportunities and tracking them. We're concerned around, you know, how farmers markets and farmers can successfully adapt to new social distancing rules. So it's been covered, and I know people like Shelley and folks at City Parks here in Pittsburgh and others have been working on, you know, some of these early markets that are showcasing, I guess, or hoping to showcase ways that it can work efficiently and successfully. So looking forward to those early results and developments. You know, a lot of the ag concerns, there's some immediate ones, but we're also kind of looking ahead. A lot of our farms here really don't start selling in markets until April and May, and some of our farm stores are seasonal. So right now there is a lot of, I guess, apprehension and concern from people who are putting plants and seeds in the ground now about what they're making these investments now, but they're uncertain of what their opportunities to you know, profit off those investments or get a return are going to look like, particularly once May hits. So, you know, looking at best practices and information around, you know, when we're, you know, looking to peak here, you know, in terms of COVID cases in mid-April, and what May might look like in terms of public health guidance. You know, there's labor issues. There's been some delays in the H-2A visa process. So some of our farms that sell to stores, in particular, like larger markets, you know, they rely on labor, fruit, and larger diversified vegetable operations, and some dairies. So are they going to be able to get labor onto their farms in time for planting and then harvesting? And then obviously, you know, there are impacts to small gardens and nonprofit farms here in the city. just because of delays in volunteer days and work and uncertainty around what's safe in the garden. And so just a whole host of things we're sort of tracking. Let's see, you asked for some policy updates. So some folks have talked about the CARES Act, which was recently signed by the president. Within that relief package was $9.5 billion for a disaster relief fund for livestock, dairy, specialty crop, and farms that serve their local food system. So people that sell to local markets and restaurants and school systems. So that's 9.5 billion out of a much larger bucket of money that mostly went to commodity crop farmers. But there's really, the guidance on how that money is actually going to be spent is to be determined. So one of the things that, from a policy standpoint that we need to keep an eye on is the framework for actually spending and distributing that money to farmers. So making sure that the voices of some of the larger lobbying organizations like the Cattlemen's Association or some of the, the more non-regional commercial commodity operations and their lobbies, don't outweigh the voices of small and community-based farmers who are selling locally, who've also been hit. So keeping an eye on the CARES Act and that $9.5 billion. Other policy updates, obviously, Department of Ag and the governor declared agriculture and food as essential businesses. So, looking at that Department of Agriculture COVID-19 information page and the resources on there for everything from producers to farmers to, packaging and distribution to restaurants and farmers markets. So there's all sorts of guidance on that Department of Ag COVID page. So getting that information out to people and making them aware of the updates. And just, keeping an eye on other types of funding that may be leveraged to help food systems kind of strengthen and recover after, particularly after the shock of this to a lot of systems. So the FML, FPP, Farmers Market Local Food Promotion Program grant round just opened. They put $27 million at the federal level into this local food grant program. So, it's something to think about in terms of treating issues that we're seeing right now or that we've been noticing for the last year of this food action plan writing process. So those are some of the policy things we're looking at, where the money is, what the laws actually will do once they're enacted, and what the guidance is for farmers and associated businesses. In terms of existing needs, we're going to talk about this a lot on Tuesday, but mostly just consistent and clear pathways of information, particularly for farmers. Guidance is shifting, opportunities are shifting, markets are shifting. So, messaging that is not necessarily centralized, but if people are getting it through their different networks, it's fairly consistent and understandable and up to date. So working on combining and getting out through our various networks up-to-date information for farmers. Some of that guidance can also extend to updated best practices for health departments or municipalities or other local governmental units around farmers markets or selling safely from farmers to consumers. Obviously existing needs are organizing and informing various farmers markets around the region so that they understand what's safe. Whoever owns the property that they're operating on understands what's safe, and people have the resources to be able to operate safely. That includes the vendors who sell at those markets, having the resources they need to be able to comply with best practices. As social distancing is going on, obviously, businesses related to ag are still operating, but in a different capacity. So as growers here in the city or outside the city need access to compost and seed and seedlings, labor and equipment, finding safe ways to get people to those resources is important. And then, the last piece is obviously needing to advocate for that $9.5 billion to be spent in a way that people can access it here. Those are our existing needs. Yeah, and lots of long-term avenues for change. Obviously, everybody's noticing what this means for our food system to be given a shock like this, and so it definitely does refocus attention on some of the priorities that were already being worked on in the food action plan, but also priorities that are appearing now. So I think it definitely renews calls for robust regional food system, for new farmers, for farm vitality, for market access. For community resilience through gardening, community and home gardening. So there's just a whole host of things that we see, not just now, but in the months to come, that we need to be sort of drawing attention to and working to provide information on. So we're going to start on Tuesday at the Urban Ag Working Group, hearing from everybody about what's going on in their networks and in their operations, and then starting to do our best to pool a lot of these bits of information and resources together and sharing them. So I think that's about all I've got.
Thanks so much, John. I want to see if either Celeste or Raquib or a representative from the Black Urban Gardeners and Farmers are on the line, and if so, give you a couple of minutes. But I can't, in my scan, I'm not seeing anyone, but go ahead and jump in if you are on the line. But I did have a couple of questions a question that came out through our member survey. One was, I'm not sure when PWSA usually turns on the water sources for community gardens, but that's a question. Could the water be turned on since we're having such a mild spring? I don't believe it's been turned. That was a question that came from Lisa Freeman.
I do know that the city just sent out the notice to everybody for all of those folks who get the turn on through the city of Pittsburgh. So those notices just went out to all the growers. So yeah, that process.
So maybe that's a work in process. Okay. And the other question that was raised was, would it be possible to use community development block grant funds to support community garden and farm operations? We're seeing, Garfield Community Farms and Bugs and many gardens. I mean, they already produce food to share with neighbors and community members. And in this time of increased need, is there any public funding that could be directed in this direction from CDBG or other sources, whether that's city, county, or otherwise? That's just a question that's been put out, and I think it's an interesting one.
They certainly have elsewhere. So there are lots of examples in cities where a portion of those block grant funds have been made available for urban agriculture type community food grants. So certainly examples out there to pull from.
Maybe that's something to take up at the Urban Ag Working Group meeting. I think we are at or beyond time, and I appreciate all of your patience in listening. It's hard to do this kind of thing this time of night, and I know some people have already signed off having future Zoom meetings to do yet this evening. So I just want to reiterate, if there's a need, a resource, anything that you would like to share with us, or a group of folks you would like the council to help pull together or make connections, please let us know. That's what we're here to do. And we look forward to finding other ways to connect. There's many pieces of this conversation that this is just the beginning. So thank you all so much for joining, and thank you for taking care of those around you and for all the work that you do. We look forward to following up with a summary of this information and continuing the conversation as we go forward. I don't know if anyone had any closing thing you wanted to say, Denny or Mim or anyone on staff. I think we're good. Well, I hope everyone, who's that?
That was me. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. This was definitely our first big Zoom meeting, and we're all learning our way, as maybe some of you are, how to handle this. So thanks for your patience with all of the communications to the speakers, and yeah, just appreciate you guys all being here. We've had anywhere from 60 to almost 90 people on the call, so that's been wonderful.
Thank you, Carla.
Let me also thank the speakers. I really appreciate your concise and very informational comments, and I look forward to collaborating more deeply going forward. I think everyone's just saying goodbye on the side here, so let's leave it at that. Thank you so much, and we will be in touch again soon, I'm sure. Be well, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.